Good night, Belizeans at home and abroad. This is the Belizean Affairs Show number 382. 382. My name is Leonard Brackett, and I will be your chairman for tonight, being Friday. We'll be discussing some more of the constitutional amendment recommendations by the PCC and other issues. Uh, Before proceeding any further, I'll follow the process that we normally do on our show, which is to say a short prayer and then do a short reading. I'll just bow my head to say a short prayer. Divine loving Father, thou who art the creator of heaven and earth, thou who art my creator, thou who has granted us the privilege of life first and foremost, and the privilege to still be among our family members, friends, and loved ones at the beginning of this next year of 2026. We thank thee for thy past blessings and thy mercies unto us all. We pray that thou mayest continue to bless our country of Belize, its people and leadership, that thou would continue to bless this country of the United States, its people and leadership as well, and that thou would continue to bless the rest of humanity. Thou knowest our trials and tribulations and travails, loving Father. We pray that thou be merciful unto us all. For those who have need of food and clothes and shelter, we pray that thou provide for them. For those who are in war zones and other disasters, man-made or natural, we pray that thou mayest grant them relief, loving Father. We pray that thou mayest guide us also as we present this program tonight, that whatever we say or do may it accrue to the best interest and well-being of our country of Belize, its people and leadership as well. So we ask these mercies in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you very much for allowing us the privilege to continue our endeavor and to follow the same uh, guiding principles that we have used from the beginning of our platform. You may notice that we don't have, or at least as of right now, I don't have uh, the other panelists on the show. That is because they're on vacation, recovering from the holiday season, and we're looking forward to have them on this coming Monday, which will be our first real program for the year. Hopefully, we'll have a review of some of the things that we did and some accomplishments for last year, because a lot of people have been saying all we do is just talk, talk, talk. They fail to understand that without talk and communications, your ideas and expectations will not be heard or met by anyone. But for those of you who grace us with your presence next Monday, we hope to point out to you some of the things that we have spoken about and that we have had success in, not only on our own, but with the help of others. But for some reason or another, we need for people to understand that we're not just here bantering and, trying to present ourselves on this platform as if somehow or another we're trying to, become popular, famous, or do something that is beyond our reach. For those who have been with us on this ride so far, up to the 381st past programs, and for those who have not been with us, you can go back and check those programs, and you'll see for yourself that we did not talk, talk, talk like some people say, and just use a lot of idle words and achieve nothing. Otherwise, by now we would have probably been discouraged. We have had laws made to silence us. We have had them attempt to use the Constitution to silence us, and a lot of other stuff. But that's not what this program is about tonight. So let me just digress from that and get to the essence of what our program is. Um, as I indicated earlier, it's going to be a bit about the recommendations that were made by the PCC to the Prime Minister for him to use as a basis to take to the House and then figure out whether or not they're going to get the support to eviscerate the present constitution in lieu of what they're recommending. We'll have many more days and sessions such as these teachable moment sessions, and we'll deal with the rest of, well, some more of those matters. But for right now, I just want to finish up doing the reading. I'll read Daniel chapter 3. Daniel is in the Old Testament, by the way. And I'll read chapter 3, starting at verse 1. It's quite a bit of reading, so I will only read probably verse 1 and maybe verse 2. It reads as follows. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made an image of gold, whose height was 80 cubits, and the breadth thereof was 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. Then, verse 2, Nebuchadnezzar, the king, sent together teachers, the princes, the governors, and the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar, the king, had set up, for them to come and inaugurate the king's statue that was set up and to glorify the king. There's a lot more reading to that particular chapter and passage, but I won't get into that. But I'll try and apply it as I do my discourse tonight, or my teachable moment effort tonight. And I'll make a general overstatement by saying that we also have someone in Belize who would like to presume to be himself a king. You notice that I was a little coy in my phraseology, right? Or in my way of phrasing what I stated or said. I'm going to repeat it again. Maybe with different words, but for all intents and purposes, addressing the same core or essence of the matter for my topic tonight. We have what we call in Belize a system of governance. Of course, that's the ending of my reading. So I'll proceed now into the making my presentation, this particular teachable moment for tonight. And we have a system of governance in Belize that we call a democratic parliamentary system of governance. We have in our system of governance 3 sections of government, each of whom or which has its own authority under the law, under the Constitution, to participate in the governance of our country. And each is supposed to be separate in its functions and powers and authority, and none is supposed to run roughshod over any other. And we have the judiciary, which is the guardian of the Constitution and the interpreter of what is constitutional or what is not. We have the legislative body, which is empowered with the authority to make laws for the government and governance of the country, and to amend the Constitution in places where it is permissible. as compared to the mindset of some people that I've had these same discussions with. Some of them senior lawyers, by the way, senior counsels. Some of them have been attorney generals and others in our country, among whom we have entertained these discussions on issues of constitutional prerogatives or purview. Some of them have the idea that because the legislative, which is the second body that I'm talking about, has authority to change the constitution, to make changes if they can muster certain percentage of the votes in the House, they have the impression that then with that 2/3 or 3/4 majority, the body can basically, for all intents and purposes, get rid of the Constitution and just replace the Constitution with something new or some other Constitution. And I keep explaining and trying to point out to them that that is not the system of governance that we have. We don't have a republic system of governance or any of the other form of governance, because there are dozens and dozens of different variations and types of governance throughout the world. But our system of governance, you have what you call the separation of powers doctrine that governs how our system operates. And the separation of powers doctrine says that you have 3 equal branches of government, none of which should tamper with the powers and authority vested in it by the Constitution, because the Constitution, according to Section 2 of our present Constitution, says this Constitution is the supreme law of Belize. And if any other law, such as the laws that are made by the legislative body, if any other law is made and is inconsistent with this existing Constitution, then that other law is null, to the extent of its inconsistencies, is null and void. Why? Because you only have one Constitution at a time, and whatever the Constitution says is the law of the land until it is modified, or until portions are modified. And there's no question as to whether or not portions of the Constitution can be modified, because the Constitution says the authority to modify the very same Constitution, the pieces or the parts that are permissible, is authorized to the legislative body. They are the lawmakers. But then there are some parts of the Constitution that cannot be written out of existence. And that's where the crucible or the crux of the matter comes in, for these elaborate debates and for these misguided misinterpretation, alignment of constitutional credence or credibility, that some people advocate differently, not because they wouldn't know or they are not capable of learning or knowing or understanding these things, but because that's the way they would like for it to be. But it is what it is, and it's not what other people would like for it to be. But we have some smart jackals in our country who presume that because they're elected by the people, they can take the mandate given to them by the people to eviscerate the Constitution and to do just about what they want and to run the country like it's a dictator. They go and swear allegiance and fidelity to the Constitution and the people of Belize, and they turn around when they are assented the power of governance. They govern as they wish and how they want, and they do what they want, and they don't follow the laws. They act like scofflaws. They act like the Constitution does not exist anymore because they have powers in their hands. And the powers that they have in their hands are limited. because there are some powers that are not vested in them, that are reserved powers and reserved unto the people, as well as reserved powers unto the head of state, as well as reserved powers unto the governor general, as well as reserved powers unto the prime minister that the other ministers does not have, as well as reserved powers to the prime minister that the head of department does not, the other ministers in the department that the um, ministers of state does not have and cannot exercise. At each level and stage of the system, you have what is supposed to be checks and balances. But as I said earlier, the fact that those rules and regulations, principles, procedures, protocols, and all these measures that are put in place or are supposed to exist in place for good governance, they're all subverted and we end up with bad governance. As a matter of fact, we don't end up with proper governance. We don't end up with good governance. And when people question and or start advocating for a change of the behavior of those who are entrusted with our governance, they become offended and they feel like, well, they are the ones that are that should take more offense to, rather than the people to whom they are not giving proper governance and who are asking them to do what's right. So remember, I mentioned about one part of the governance structure, which is the judiciary earlier. And I also just finished talking about the second part of our governance, right? Which is the executive. Each different levels of the executive have reserved powers unto themselves, going up the chain of command, that the lower level members do not have those powers vested in them and or the right or ability to be able to exercise powers that are impermissible to them. I'll go to the next level. I think I spoke about earlier, I misspoke. I said that I had spoken about the judiciary, which was the first one. And then I spoke about I spoke about said it was the executive, but I didn't meant to say the executive at that time. I should have more likely said, well, as a matter of fact, since I've already described the executive, let me just go to the third one then, right? Which is the legislative body. The legislative body of the country is permitted to make certain changes in the Constitution, and they are barred from making other changes in certain other parts of the Constitution because, for example, the legislative cannot, I'm giving you an example rather than just say or say the words out in terms of the legality and the structure, right? I'm trying to, because right now when I'm doing these teachable moments programs, I'm trying to reach, or I'm trying to come down to the level where the majority of the people in the country, most of whom are not on the same level as many others, and who are not exposed to these esoteric or specialized issues relating to governance, are not familiar with the process and the procedures. We're not taught these things adequately in schools, well, at least not recently. And so a lot of people are unfamiliar. They hear other people speak about these things, but they have no real knowledge or true understanding about the pros and cons, of these issues. So when I'm doing my little thing here on this platform, for example, I'm trying to reach the masses. So there are many people sometimes who understand and know what I'm talking about, and probably to them it's a waste of their time for me to be doing these kind of programs because I'm not helping them. But they have to remember that there are other people who are not as lucid as they are, knowledgeable as they are, and who should be afforded the opportunity to learn and understand some of these things. So for those who are already knowledgeable and aware, I wish they would participate in the process of helping to educate others, rather than just keep their knowledge to themselves and criticize others who are trying to make the effort to help others learn and understand about these things. And that is the category that I find myself falling into. I have a burden on my shoulder to inform the general public on these matters and others. The government spent millions of dollars in a bogus education campaign, did not complete the education campaign, and they stopped the effort. Does that mean that I'm supposed to stop, or other people who are doing the same thing like myself are supposed to stop because the government stopped? No, the people still need to be informed. Why? It is the people that has to cast votes. And an uninformed plebiscite is a danger to any democracy. I hope I didn't say anything new just now. I didn't make news. Anyhow, we have three branches of government: the judiciary, the legislative, and the executive. In these three branches of government, we have currently an executive part of the government that is in place under the present PUP-led government. Okay, as I described earlier, we have a head of state, we have a governor general, we have a deputy governor general, we have a prime minister, we have other substantive ministers, we have what you call ministers of state, we have CEOs who manage the various government departments, and then we have department heads, because some of these CEOs have 2 or 3 portfolios sometimes under their wing for the particular minister, like in the case of the prime minister. There have been cases or situations where he held more than one portfolio at a time. So, and then we also have what you call the senior civil servants, like the permanent secretaries then that used to be, it used to be permanent secretaries. Now they all classify them as CEOs. In fact, the permanent secretary were the people who used to be the senior civil servants who would have had decades and decades of years of experience, and then they classify them as permanent secretary to a particular department and or a particular ministry. Now, what happens is that the government allows the ministers to have their own CEOs who may not have necessarily gone through the process of becoming what in the olden days we used to call permanent secretaries. They just hire their buddies, their friends, uncles, cousins, aunts, or whoever they choose to hire, and give them a position to run that department on their behalf. Whether they have the knowledge or not is immaterial. The authority is vested in them to run the department, and they get then the other senior people from the government to assist them in running it. So in other words, you have special cherries or special plums that are awarded to political favorite individuals. As I said, some of whom have no knowledge and understanding about what is it that they're supposed to be doing in the first place. But That's not where I want to go with this particular presentation tonight, so let me not belabor that too much. I want to digress back to the executive portion of our governance. And it appears currently that the executive body, after they win the general elections, they go to the Governor General to get themselves assented to with the powers of governance. In other words, to get the keys to be able to function as members of the government. And why I say that is because we have read on multiple occasions in the past on this particular subject matter here on this program about the executive power of Belize, which rests in Her Majesty or His Majesty. In other words, the executive power of Belize rests in the head of state, whoever that head of state is. Some people conflate that concept and they state that the Prime Minister is the head of state. Why? To them, it's clearly cut and dry because the Prime Minister is the Prime Minister. He's the big boss. And they don't acknowledge anyone being above the Prime Minister because the Prime Minister, according to them, is supposed to be the equivalent of the head of state. It's one and the same when it's not. But this presentation and recommendations that are being made by the PCC is attempting to conflate and pretend that the Prime Minister and the head of state should be one and the same. If they want to take on the powers of the head of state, the natural progression is to say, well, the head of state then becomes the president. And the president, exercises the powers of executive, the highest executive, and decide who the Prime Minister is going to be. And therefore then grants some of the powers that the president have to the Prime Minister so the Prime Minister can do the day-to-day running of the country. That's another form of government, like what you call a Republican form of government. As I said earlier, there are dozens and dozens of different variations of or types of governance. But the Belize system of governance is we have a parliamentary democracy. That is to say, the parliament is elected by the people to represent the people and to work on behalf of the people. But our Belizean parliament is elected by the people, but they work for themselves, their colleagues, and their family. They could care less about the country or the people. As a matter of fact, they put themselves first, they put their family second, they put those who suborn them or who they have business contacts and relationships with as third, probably. And I don't know if I can even state that the Belizean people and the country of Belize comes in at number 4. Because I've seen instances where it didn't seem like the people and the country of Belize plays any role in these individuals' paradigm in terms of what they consider to be their right to govern, or the powers vested in them for them to exercise, and how to exercise those powers. Because they don't exercise those powers as if they're doing it on behalf of the people who elected them and entrusted them with the powers of governance. Because they're the people who we elect and we entrust to work on our behalf They are our servants. We are hiring them. They're getting a salary from us to work on our behalf. We are the government, the people. When there are any payments need to be made by the government for any services or any other issues, it's the people that have to be levied for taxation or other means for that money to be raised to pay for whatever the government has to pay for. We are the people, we are the government. But the people who we hire, they feel like, well, they are the government. In fact, they conflate that to the point where people refer to the government not as the government, not as how it ought to be or should be. Some people refer to the government as those extra individuals who are hired servants. They are the government, according to some people. But if they were the government, they shouldn't be taxing us. They should take money out of their pocket and misspend and misplace, to sponsor their personal endeavor. But when it comes to the money out of their pocket, no, they don't say that they are the government. They say we are the government. They acknowledge reality then. But when they want to, like the Spanish people would say, estafar, let me not go into. I want to stay focused on the particular section of the program for tonight, and that is that, as I mentioned in my earlier commentary, we have some individuals who are currently running and controlling our affairs that we have hired, who are mismanaging our affairs, and because we complain, they want to get upset at us. Let me go to the PCC recommendation number. Let me see which one it is. I think it's number 64. Let's see. Yeah. Recommendations number 64. Let me see. The executive. Okay. All right. Fine. Okay. Let me go back to recommendation number 63. A little bit of what we did last time, so we can connect to what we're attempting to do this time. So I'll just go back on a couple of steps to permit me. Please bear with me. I'm going to be reading from the PCC recommendations to the Prime Minister, which has already been given to the Prime Minister. And I'm reading from a copy of it here. Part 5, the Executive. Recommendations number 63. It says, establishment of the executive authority. Of course, it should have said establishment of the executive authority of Belize. But, let's not quibble with small matters, Number 63, subsection 1 reads as follows. Repeal section 36 of the Constitution of Belize, subsection 1, and replace it with the executive authority of Belize is vested. Let me make this a little bit smaller, just a little smaller. Yeah, okay. I hope that's all right. Yeah, okay. Is vested in the Prime Minister, who is head of state. Does anyone know of any system of governance in any part of the world where a Prime Minister is head of state and that Prime Minister has the executive powers vested in him The closest I would come to it is maybe India, and that's not necessarily true either, for the purpose of which I'm making this comment. Uh, Section 36(1) of the Constitution of Belize reads as follows. I'll try and make sure that I read concurrently the Constitution that they cited, the section that they cited, so people could understand what is it that these people are, in their conniving ways, are trying to, embark on. So we're talking about Section 36. Yeah. Okay, let me turn sideways. I've taken up now a copy of the Constitution of Belize, in the electronic format, which is this, and I'm going to read. It's kind of 37. I want to go to 36. They're proposing here, they say, repeal Section 36(1). And I'll tell you what 36(1) says in the Constitution right now. 36(1) says, the executive authority of Belize is vested in Her Majesty or His Majesty. Okay? They're saying they want to repeal that. Now, how are they going to go about repealing that or getting the authority vested in them to repeal that? Because remember earlier I said to you that some people have the impression that because the legislator have the authority vested in it to make some modification or certain other modification, I also clarified to you that it doesn't have the authority vested in it to make just about any and all modifications. You have heard me say that over and over. But they're saying now that they're recommending here, I took up back now their recommendation, which is a different document that I'm reading from, as compared to what I just read from the Constitution, which says that the executive authority of Belize is vested in Her Majesty or His Majesty. They're saying that they want to establish an executive authority, which according to them, they want to establish it because apparently in their mind, like Christopher Columbus and the European people, America did not exist until after they discovered it. They lost ignorance by becoming aware of the fact that America existed. So at that point, when they were not ignorant anymore, they call it a discovery of theirs. So these jackals now are pretending that they don't know that the current constitution of the country have executive authority already vested in it, or stated that that authority is vested in somebody else already, the head of state. Okay, so they are just inventing sliced bread now. Apparently, they have just become aware that sliced bread is possible in this universe. So they are running now to what they call it, Amendment number 63. They are running to do the establishment of the executive authority of Belize, and they're going to take out what is in the Constitution and put what they are now saying here. The executive authority of Belize is vested in the Prime Minister. I don't know as of when. Who is head of state? I don't know how come he got to that position, who endowed him with that authority or position and that right and power. Okay, but they're taking it out, take out what the Constitution has in there in regards to that particular reference and modify it. And modifying those words according to them makes it so. The Prime Minister, who is head of state and head of government, of course, the head of government can be classified as being close to the truth. Okay? But head of state, what part of that is truth? Since when and how come? And I don't know what powers and authority. Remember, we're talking about the separation of powers issues here, right? Tonight. Remember, that was the first thing that I brought up to your attention when I started presenting the program, the separation of powers, and I try to clarify or explain away what the powers are and why and how they were separate. One branch of government have the judiciary, another branch of government have the executive, another branch of government have the legislative, and I explained that away, right? The proposed prime minister will have the authority of the executive, the authority of the judiciary, and the authority of the legislative. So for all intents and purposes, there's no separation of powers. Or there's no proposal to have a separation of powers after they make these bastardized changes to the Constitution, as if they have the authority to be able to do so in the first place. It's laughable. Okay? But let's read on. I'm not inclined to even read the rest of that little part there. It's just about another 10 words or more. But I'm so flabbergasted about, these guys putting words in my mouth, or my mouth uttering words that are so contemptible to start with, that I don't want to come off as being the one having uttered those words. So I refuse to even utter them. So I'll just skip over that. I hope that other people who are interested in those kind of craziness will spend their valuable time and go and research and look at those things for themselves and try to figure out what part of what is correct these guys refuse to accept, but I will not entertain their craziness by even uttering those treasonous, treacherous, and seditious words. Okay? I will not entertain it. I don't care who the hell gets vexed. I'll proceed on to section 2, subsection 2 of the same section 63, as per their recommendation. It says, repeal sections 36(2) of the Constitution and replace it with, open quotation, saying, subject to the provisions of this Constitution, the executive authority of Belize may be exercised on behalf of Belize, of the people of Belize, either directly or through the Prime Minister, or Deputy Prime Minister, ministers, deputy ministers, and blah, 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 blah. Basically the same thing that I just said a little earlier. The Constitution says that the executive authority of Belize is vested in Her Majesty or His Majesty, and or in the head of state. So they're going to write now as a proposal that they will deem the Prime Minister to be the head of state. They didn't say that, They say the Prime Minister is head of state. To be is means that you acquire and have already possessed the powers and authority in order to act as the head of state. Where did they get that from? When did they get that authorization or that power vested in them? We only have one constitution at a time. I keep repeating that. The present constitution has not vested any of those powers or authority onto them, because it says it is vested in the head of state. And the authority of the head of state, the executive authority, part of the powers of the executive authority is vested in the Governor General. And some parts of those executive powers are reserved to the head of state. That is to say, the head of state will always have additional powers that the Governor General has no powers or authority to exercise. So likewise, when the head of state grants the Governor General a writ to act as Governor General, there are reserved powers that the head of state does not allow the Governor General or grant the Governor General the powers or privilege to be able to exercise, such as, for example, the powers to force the head of state to demit his office. I hope people understand what I'm trying to say. The Governor General works at the pleasure of the head of state. The Governor General have no added power or any of the reserved powers of the head of state to vanquish the head of state. But these jackals went and get the Governor General to sign on with this, proposal that they are making. And because the Governor General signed on to the or at least the seal of the Governor General appears on the PCC Act that was passed in the House. That is to say, authorize them to proceed with their treacherous, treasonous, and seditious behavior. They are then apparently of the impression or the mindset that they were assented to by the Governor General for them to get rid of the Governor General boss's position as well as the Governor General's position, and for them to write a law that says that as of the point in time when that law is passed into existence, that there's no more Governor General and no more head of state. And then the Prime Minister then will assume those powers, vest them in himself, and become the head of state. You see how fast and loose these jackals play? I hope people are, following my trend of thought and clearly understanding what I'm trying to say, because maybe I might not be using the correct word to try and express what I'm trying to express. We're dealing with esoteric issues, okay? Some people have the time and patience to tolerate hearing me babble in their ears, trying to explain these things to them. But I wish that some people would take their time and effort, get a copy of these documents, read it for themselves, analyze it for themselves, contextualize it for themselves, and then make the sense out of the nonsense that I'm apparently, in their ignorance, and just like what I said earlier when somebody, I made mention about some people have said that a lot of people on Facebook and on these platforms, all we do is just talk. I just wish they would listen. And if they don't want to listen to us talk, do your own research. Stop being ignorant and stop being taken for fools. You didn't born knowing what you need to learn. And if you don't learn what you need to know, ignorance is going to hurt you the same way. Or you'll get hurt innocently because of ignorance. There's no two ways about it. You either learn from somebody trying to help you learn it, or you learn it on your own. But it's not going to fall out of the sky and drop in your head or in your ears, and you're going to observe it by osmosis. And you're going to then understand what your problems are. Belizeans at home and abroad, stop being taken for fool. Like we would say back home, stop being taken for konomone. Okay? You need to learn what you need to learn. You don't have to learn it from me. I'm not the only person that knows these things. But at least I'm one of those who are trying to make an effort for people to grasp it. So let me proceed. I'm not try to scold nobody or get vexed with nobody, you know. That's not what this is about. Can okay how vexed I get and who much or who all I get vexed with. If you don't get the knowledge in your own head, one way or another, it doesn't serve the purpose for which knowledge is supposed to serve. Because at the end of the day, you're not having the knowledge or the awareness about these things. We don't allow you to be bamboozled a little easier. Okay? And I resent to see how our country and people are being bamboozled, and then the people are being blamed for the outcomes. While the politicians then run off to the bank, you know, laughing their way to the bank and blaming the people for the outcome. So it says replace section 36, subsection 2, where it says, subject to the provisions of this constitution, the executive authority of Belize may be exercised on behalf of the people of Belize, either directly or through the Prime Minister, or Deputy Prime Minister, or Minister, or Deputy Ministers, or officers subordinate to the Prime Minister. So according to them, by placing that in the current constitution or in any new constitution, it means that it will have the effect of law, it will be constitutional. And because they make that as a law, that means that automatically they have the power to strip the head of state of the powers of head of state and grant it to themselves or to one of them. Good luck. That's all I could say to them about that. So then let's get into the section that we were supposed to start with tonight. So we're running a little late in terms of having to go back and connect what we had spoken about the last time we had the sessions. And now we're getting to the part where recommendation number 64 says to establish the direct election of the Prime Minister. We all know currently that the person and the party which has the majority elected to the House of Representatives is then recommended for ascension to become Prime Minister. That's not the same thing as being ascended to become the head of state. Okay? I hope you recognize the difference. Nor is it true that if the Prime Minister or individuals were to run for the office of the Prime Minister, that then automatically, because one individual will end up winning, and that individual who wins for the office of Prime Minister, if they were to have a separate election compared to how we do it now, by just getting the majority in the House and then you're recommended to the Governor General to be assented as Prime Minister, you get your own majority in your own election that is being held separately among whoever amount of people want to run for that particular office of the Prime Minister. And whoever gets the majority of votes then wins that privilege to be recommended to the Governor General for ascension to become the Prime Minister. But then in this case, how would a Governor General then assent to this person to become Prime Minister if they run for the Prime Minister and they win? When there shouldn't be any Governor General and there shouldn't be any other head of state. So by any stretch of the imagination, you can say that then this person is running for the office of the head of state of the country. I hope nobody thinks that I'm incorrect by that assumption or analysis or conclusion. Because for all intents and purposes, that is what the intent to do that is, to have somebody run for the Prime Minister job, and the Prime Minister, according to them, is head of state. They never say will be head of state or becomes head of state after they are elected for the office of head of state rather than the office of the Prime Minister, because they are conflating. They're trying to get you from where you are to where they want you to be or where they want, to be. but they're not leveling with you and telling you exactly what is it that they're trying to do and how they're trying to get it done. So they're taking you for the ride, believing, so that you can continue believing that you're voting for a prime minister, but for all intents and purpose, the office will not be called the office of the prime minister, as they are telling you here right now. The office will be the office of the head of state, which is above the prime minister, because the prime minister is not head of state. Even though they tried to allude to you earlier by saying that the prime minister is head of state. Mr. Belizean have always wanted to be the head of state. All our past prime ministers have always wanted to be head of state. I won't tell you why they weren't allowed to be head of state, because that's not tonight's discussion. Hopefully, at some other future date, probably during the course of this year, we might get into some of those, and I might be able to explain and provide the basis for that. Because it's another long story. But the prime minister shall be elected by direct vote every 4 years on the same date, which is to say, as per their proposal here, will be the last Wednesday of November, and he will assume office on January the 2nd of the subsequent year. So in other words, they will have an election on the last Wednesday of November of each 4-year term, and then the office will be, the person who wins that election will assume office as they call it the prime minister here. Again, they're still insisting in calling it the prime minister. Okay? And they already said is head of state. The prime minister is head of state. Level with the people and said, not the prime minister, because you're not running for prime minister office, you're running for the head of state office. And that head of state will be the president of a future Republic of Belize. Explain to the people. Instead of just taking them for a ride, it's like you have a little kid out in the park and you put them in the swing, but you don't swing them too hard. Put them in the baby swing and swing them a little bit, and and then later on, before the year is up, when the kid is already adjusted to the baby swing, you put them in the big swing, and then you could swing on hard. You could even make it do turns, go around and over and above and below because you get the experience, right? These jackals, they think that all of us are a bunch of idiots, okay? And so they treat us like idiots. They treat us with disdain and disrespect. Anyhow, now, this part here that I'm about to read, okay, this is not in our current constitution. This is part of the recommendations that they are making, okay? So that's what I'm reading from. But please, if you haven't paid much attention to what I was saying before, you haven't grasped any of it, or you wasn't interested, or you had lost interest, I beg your indulgence in allowing me your attention to read to you paragraph A of this particular recommendation that they made, especially as regards to subsection 2. Subsection 2 says, the executive branch shall include the following functions and power. That one word. If you don't remember nothing else that I've said or will be saying for tonight, remember that one word, power. That's what it's all about at the end of the day, from beginning to end. Everything else before, current, or after is just little what you call candies that they put into the ice cream to make it taste a little better or be more destructive. Okay. Here we go. Paragraph A. The Prime Minister acts as the head of state and the commander-in-chief of all the armed forces. Remember, there was a point where they were proposing that the Prime Minister, because the court had ordered them to pay some of the people that they had mistreated under the bogus state of emergencies before, and they were told to pay those people a certain compensation. They went and decided to make another law to go against that. Amendment 13, anybody remember that? And the onerousness of it, and the reason why they had gone ahead and make Amendment 13, that is to say, to hell with the judiciary and the judges, and they will not abide by nothing that the judges have to say. They have no respect and regards for the next third branch of government. And even though the Constitution says that they have no jurisdiction to overrule and or to do anything contrary to the directions of the Supreme Court, who is entrusted with the powers and authority to validate what is legal, what is lawful, and what is constitutional. These jackals in cabinet or the Prime Minister are attempting to hijack the authority and powers of the very judiciary, as I pointed out earlier. And now you'll see why. So I'm asking you, I'm begging for your indulgence to please listen to what I'm saying here. Because I'm not saying, it's not like I'm saying anything out of my own head. I'm reading it. I wish everybody would have the privilege and access to have a copy of this thing, so that when I'm making my references or reading, that they could be reading it themselves and following it and see that it's not, I'm not trying to pull no wool over nobody's eyes. But under the circumstance, I got to do the best I can. So I have some of the material and I'm using it for the presentation. But you don't have to believe me. Make some effort and go and get the material yourself. So you don't have to, rely on nobody else, Be a good skeptic. The Prime Minister acts as the head of state and the commander-in-chief of all the armed forces, whose officers he shall commission. Remember when he dealt with the SOEs, the bogus SOEs, and they went ahead and made the proposal for the 13th Amendment? That is to say that they won't have to abide by Section 18 of the Constitution as is currently, but rather they will rely on the bastardized Amendment 13 to the Constitution to instruct them that the Prime Minister will depend on the head of military services, the police, and others, to tell him when an SOE is needed, and he will direct an SOE to be put in place, as compared to them having to go to the Governor General currently for ascension and prove to the Governor General that they have a need or a valid reason to do such a state of emergency, because a state of emergency meaning the authority, extra judicial authority, to trample on people's basic rights, which they're not empowered to do, other than under a state of emergency. So they declare a bogus state of emergency in order to trample on people's rights. But they first have to get it assented to. So they won't have any need for ascension of that anymore. The Prime Minister is going to appoint these very same people, and they will come to him and tell him when they want a state of emergency, and he will just issue a state of emergency. Bunch of jackals. He shall commission these very heads of the chief of the armed forces. He is responsible for implementing and enforcing the laws passed by the National Assembly before the execution of his office, he shall take the following oath or affirmation as prescribed by Schedule X. That is to say, open quotation, I do solemnly swear or affirm in bracket that I will faithfully execute the office of the Prime Minister of Belize and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend Belize and the Constitution of Belize. Under paragraph B, to continue in the same section, the Prime Minister shall nominate, subject to the approval of the Senate by simple majority, all ministers, all attorney generals, deputy ministers, chairmen of government statutory boards, chairmen of commissions, heads of departments, governors of the central bank, judges, magistrates, ambassadors, and other officials who are vetted and approved by majority in the Senate of the or the National Assembly of the. No person appointed by the Prime Minister shall be a member of the National Assembly. That itself is a contradiction of what we just read above in the same one paragraph, okay? In one paragraph, they are contradicting. They are saying one thing above, and a little farther down in the same paragraph, they are contradicting what they have just said. The Prime Minister shall nominate, subject to the approval of the Senate by simple majority, all ministers, attorney generals, deputy ministers, chairman of government security boards, chairman of commissions. He shall appoint heads of departments. He shall appoint governor of the central bank. He shall appoint the judges and the magistrates. Remember, I told you he was taking over the powers and authorities of the court, subordinating the court to the Prime Minister's beck and call, which is not how the separation of powers doctrine mandates it to be. The Prime Minister is not supposed to be deciding what is lawful and not lawful. That's the purview and the prerogative of the Supreme Court as part of the judiciary. They have their own authority under the Constitution as a separate one out of the three branches of government. But the Prime Minister, according to their recommendation, will have the right and the power and authority to lord over the judiciary. That's not equal powers. That's not separation of powers. They are violating the very doctrines on which our country is governed. All because they want to be dictators. They want to be arbitrary and capricious. And they want the law to come out of their head rather than the law that's on the book. Bunch of jackals and hyenas, man. Anyhow, I'll proceed to section C, and not section C, paragraph C of the same section. The Prime Minister shall receive heads of state and ambassadors and other public ministers, and he shall have power. Remember that word power that I told you about just now? One word. And you'll see it repeated over and over and over. It's all about power. And I wasn't being gratuitous when I said that earlier. I have read the whole of this stuff. I've studied it. I've contextualized it. I've compared it to what it is compared to our current constitution. And I see it very faulty. Which is why I take it upon myself to do these presentations. People need to know. And somebody don't tell you how the devils you're going to get to know. Because on your own, you're not going out there and researching or finding out or learning about these things. To some people, it's too esoteric. To some people, they don't have the time to be bothered with it. They have their daily life that they have to live and whatever other drudgeries they have to deal with. But these things affect our daily lives and will affect the lives of the future generations. I'll proceed to read some more of the material. Subject to the approval of the Senate, to make treaties, covenants, conventions, agreements, protocols, regional and international organizations provide 2/3 of the senators present concur and approve such agreements. I'll go ahead and read paragraph D in the same section, which reads as follows. The office of the Prime Minister shall consist of his Chief of Staff, the immediate staff, the Office of Finance, Management and Budget, the Office of Trade. He shall provide a budget for the approval by the National Assembly, and each minister shall provide a full report on all activities of their ministries to the National Assembly at the end of every fiscal year. That itself is kind of a shortcoming, because each department, not only on an annual basis, supposed to have reports available for the Inspector General to review and contextualize in terms of what was requested, what was assigned to it, and what was done with the budget financing. As I said earlier, the Prime Minister currently, and maybe in the future as well, will have more than one portfolio. And the way the power grab is being recommended here is that he will definitely end up with a lot more portfolios than any other previous Prime Minister, including himself, who had to hold over portfolio temporarily from other ministers. Do you recall what happened during the course of the last term that they had? They had to move ministers from different portfolios, and the Prime Minister gave to others, and sometimes he kept some of them to himself, to the point where he didn't even know what was going on in his own financial department, where he was making claims, stating, as a matter of fact, that he did not know certain things was happening after when they were caught with their hands in the cookie jar. And he tried to exculpate himself and try to provide deniability for himself to say that, well, he didn't know. How the devil he know when the buck stops with him? If he assumed the position and the authority and the rights of those particular departments to run them under his own guidance, then he is ultimately responsible. He is the Prime Minister. He's not just a minister responsible for one portfolio. He's responsible for multiple portfolios. So why take on more than he can handle? And then have people inside those portfolios dipping their finger into the cookie jar. And when they blame the Prime Minister because it's his ministry or his portfolio, he claims ignorance. So what the devils are we paying him for to perform those jobs if he is unattentive enough to let people commit crimes under the color of law or within his own department and under his guise, for him just to try and exculpate himself and claim ignorance? That's not good enough. The Prime Minister may issue executive orders which direct executive officers or clarify regulations, statutory instruments, or subjects to the approval of the National Assembly to further existing laws. That's nothing new. That's been going on all the time. As a matter of fact, they should be doing more of that. That is to say, stop making bogus statutory instruments, SIs. They should get proper guidance. Get legal minds to point out to them some of the errors or omissions or oversights in some of these messed up statutory instruments that they produce, and then they go and lose cases in court because of it. We've been telling them that over and over and over, and they pretend like, well, it's no big deal. Of course, when they lose the cases, money don't come out of their salaries or out of their pocket. The Prime Minister himself alluded to the fact, which is a fact, that the public pays the bills. But not because the public pays the bill, that means you have to be so onerous and so unattentive and so don't give a damn. You have a job to do. Do your job. Or stop collecting for the job. Otherwise, you can be accused of taking money under false pretext as well. You can collect money for a job and don't do the job. That amounts to stealing. So they put it in a lot of different ways. I'll go ahead and read paragraph F. Yeah, I need to read paragraph F. I think that's the last one too. What timing would I right now? 1:16. Okay. I haven't been reading much from the Constitution itself because we were taken up with quite a bit of the verbiage or the craziness that these people are writing here in these proposals. Some of which have some merits, and others are just gratuitous writing for writing's sake to try and show that, well, some work was being done. Just it's frustrating because if I, as somebody who have competence in these matters, see them doing what they're doing, imagine people that don't really know anything about these things or don't have the time or the patience or the attention, that have to be trying to hustle a daily living. These things get away, they become law, and then they use it to hurt people with. Then people have to go find attorneys to try and help them get out of these problems. They can't find money to feed themselves or take care of their daily needs, but they're expected to go and find money to pay attorneys to keep them safe and out of jail. How onerous is that? Bunch of jackals. They're just chancy, that's all. They're just chancy because they can get away with doing these kind of things without any consequence. None of them goes to jail as a result of these things. It's others that go to jail. They have the government coffers to hire attorneys to defend them on any issues. They could defend their family, their friends. In fact, a lot of times recently, they have been taking on legal responsibilities on behalf of friends and other business people at tax expense or at the expense of the people's purse, just so they can look good. Let me finish with this stuff. Paragraph F reads as follows. He, the Prime Minister, shall sign bills passed in the National Assembly into laws. That is that he, the Prime Minister, will be replacing the Governor General, who then currently signs the bills that comes out of the House of Representatives. They are proposing that the Prime Minister will assume those responsibilities. I don't know where the devils he's going to get the authority to make what he is signing become legal, lawful, or authority, have legal authority behind it, or be constitutional. But because they're going to say he's head of state, then apparently under that guise, because they say he's head of state and he signs it without head of state powers and authorities, they will accept it as good enough. It's like you go to a store with funny money, with false money, bogus money that somebody else write on their own, not legal tenders, that's provided by the government. bunch of jackals, man. Um, an act, okay, so that he signs them into law as an act, or he can let the bill lie for 10 days, then it becomes law, or he can veto the bill and send it back to the National Assembly, which requires a vote of two-thirds majority to pass and become law. Currently, even when they have a two-thirds or three-quarter majority and they pass the laws in the assembly, they still need the ascension of the individual who holds the heads of state powers. How do they propose to get the powers from the head of state? Would be a question that I would like for them to answer. In conjunction with all these proposals that they are making, okay? They are making proposals. They have made them already. The Prime Minister have them sitting on his desk for quite a few months now, and nothing has been done about it. These matters have not been brought to the public other than by virtue of my bringing it to the public right now and discussing it with the public. But I'm not reaching everybody in the country. Not everybody listens to our platform or our programs. So there's going to be a hell of a lot of people who are unaware as to what is really happening behind the scene. And one of these fine days, sooner rather than later, it is my belief that these jackals are going to bring this matter to the House of Representatives, vote on it quickly, in one day probably, like they always tend to do nowadays. You know, they go to the House and they read the matter 3 times in one day and pass it into law. And so they're going to have a bogus law on the book, pretending that that law trumps the Constitution. A bunch of sickos, man. Anyhow, I'm very close to ending of the program for tonight. How about 8-9 minutes more? I'll try and take a stab at recommendation number 65. Qualification and disqualification of Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister. We have, that's number 65, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, oh wow, that's quite a lot of, that's going to be a lot more reading than we will be able to deal with, and reading and commentary, and that will put us too far beyond our time to quit the show. So I'm not too sure if we should indulge in taking that up. Maybe we should skip over that particular 60 item number 6, recommendation number 65, and deal with a couple of the shorter ones in the interest of timeliness. Okay. I'm giving you a heads up as to what's going on in my head in terms of thought processes, so the program for tonight can get to a point where we can close it off easily without leaving too many strings hanging. So I'm recommending, I'm using that term now, I'm recommending that we deal with their recommendation number 66 and skip over number 65, probably for another occasion, since it's so much material involved there in that one. So we can go to 66, and maybe we might have enough time left to do, let me see, 67. We might have enough time to do 67, but I'm not promising it because I'm not sure that it's going to be possible. But let's do 66, for example. It should be easy. They are recommending item number 66 as being an item to classify as impeachment. That is to say, the Prime Minister can be impeached or could be impeached, or the Deputy Prime Minister could be impeached, because those are the two subjects in the previous item number 65, which we haven't gone through and we won't be able to go through specifically for tonight because it's too much materials to be dealt with. So let's, their recommendation number 66 says, there shall be a mechanism for impeachment established for all elected appointed officials, all civil servants, and heads of department. And oh man, touched the stuff the wrong way and just oh man. I touched the surface of the screen and it just went crazy on me. Pushed me all the way over to number 92 and I was at 67. Let's see, 64. Recommendation 64. No, I think I was at 67 if I'm not mistaken. Please pardon my babbling in your ears while I'm trying to rationalize this process here. Yeah, I got it back. Okay. Yeah, number 66, impeachment. There shall be a mechanism for impeachment established for all the elected and appointed officials, all civil servants and heads of departments and contract officers as well. And that's the end of that. They didn't elaborate much. They just proposed that there be some establishment of some kind of mechanism. They didn't say what mechanism and how, other than just to say, well, they're proposing that should be a consideration. But their job was supposed to have fleshed that out. The PCC job was not only to make a recommendation, but to provide as much possible input so that the law can be considered seriously and understood clearly. Man. Anyhow, so that's all they had there. I don't know if I should go beyond that to elaborate what they refused or didn't choose to elaborate on. If I were to do that, then I'll become a little bit gratuitous, knowing that they only have that one little line item there, and I would go ahead and comment on all the possibilities that could have and should have. I'll just forego that. And let me see the timing again. Oh, we're at the end. What I would probably do then, in the interest of time, because within 3 minutes of the closing of the show, and I don't think that 3 minutes, 2 minutes. I don't think that we should, proceed any further. But I just want to say that there's a lot of these things, like the ones we have been dealing with tonight and the previous nights, that needs to be dealt with and need to be fleshed out, need to be clarified or understood. The public need to derive the benefit of knowing or learning about these things, and they're not even putting the document in public for people to get it at their own timing or when they could. This document that I'm reading here is a copy of the document that was submitted to the Prime Minister months ago. This stuff should have been in public already, for public discourse, for the people to have their own public discussion on these matters and get an idea as to whether or not they like what they're hearing, they approve of it, they would like to have it be implemented or not be implemented or changed. But these jackals are holding everything in abeyance so that they can come at the last minute and jam it down the throat of the people. And of course, some people will say, well, it's my party, so I'm just going to go ahead. Whatever they say must be right. If they don't have enough faith in the people, I think I'm going to spare myself the stress of having to be aggravated any further, at least as regards to this particular presentation, knowing that we have come to the end of it within a few seconds. And I'd just like to say tonight to the Belizeans at home and abroad and others who indulge in hearing or listening to what we have to offer, please accept our humble expression of gratitude and thankfulness for your presence and your attentiveness. the time we know is valuable. A lot of you people are working people, you know. I mean, sometimes when we are presenting our program, it's either time for you to be at your coming or traveling from your work, going home, or maybe getting home, trying to relax, throw off your shoes and relax and get ready for your meal, or maybe getting ready for bed to jump up early the next following day to go back to work again, you know, being on the grind, you know. We don't take for granted or feel like, you know, we deserve your time other than for the fact that we're dealing with a bunch of people who are not serious about acting in good faith towards us, and therefore we're trying to fill in some of the gap, do a little part. It's never going to be done 100% correctly. Why? Because it's a grand endeavor. It's the constitution of the country. It requires a lot more professional minds, technical assistance, and legal minds to discuss these matters, flesh them out, and come up with proper recommendation as regards to them just having something in their back pocket that they want to do and just create a bogus commission that they didn't sponsor fully, they didn't give them enough time, and didn't have the people's well-being at heart. Because a lot of these recommendations are onerous. Why they choose to put them out there, I don't know. It baffles me. Because if they wanted to do a job in order to come up with a better constitution than what we have, I would say that most people would think that that would have been laudable. But why the devils they are going to spend so much research, so much time, and try to bamboozle us into getting rid of what we have currently that has served us well, in lieu of something that we know from what we are reading, what they are proposing is not better than what we had, and which will lead us into a worse situation than where we are today. Belizeans at home and abroad, thank you for your time spared, and I hope that whatever was said here or done tonight, if you take it one time and rationalize it out on your own, have an opportunity to grab a copy of the Constitution, review the sections that were being cited, find a way to get a copy of this particular document, the proposals that the CCP Commission made, read it for yourself, study it, not just read it, because remember, it's a grand endeavor, it's a very serious matter. And when somebody comes to you telling you that they want to change the Constitution, they're up to no good. That's my perspective. I could be wrong. I'll leave it at that for tonight because, like I said, it's a long journey we have been on, and it's going to be a much longer journey that we need to continue on in terms of going through the whole of this process. And all I could say is, God bless Belize and Belizeans at home and abroad, and I wish you the best. And I'm happy that we were blessed and given the opportunity, those of us who survived and are here now into the new year of 2026. 2025 was a nightmare. I hope this is a better year for us all. Good night. God bless Belize and Belizeans now and always is my wishes. End of the program.